So typically these essays look like this. You've got an intro. A lot of times your intro has like a hook in it. There's two styles of intro that we'll talk about, a hook or a funnel. But a lot of times you're trying to like get your reader's attention, right? And then at the end of your intro, you'll have your thesis. A lot of people have been taught a three-pronged thesis statement. So you'll have a claim plus 3 reasons why your claim is true. So it might be something like, never think of school uniforms. Let's do something more fun. Marijuana. Yeah. Should be legalized. And then I've got my 3 reasons. Earn money for the state. Cut back on prison populations. And then number 3 will be like not addictive. Have you had to write AP essays before?
Like in our other AP classes?
Oh, I'm not totally sure. I'm not sure how they're teaching them. And I am teaching you the same way I teach AP language though. So it is like an AP language essay. But okay, so this is kind of like how a 3-pronged thesis statement might work. Yeah.
Why do you have these arguments prepared?
I got more than that. No, I sometimes hold discussions about this, but anyway, so let's say those are my 3 reasons. I would have paragraph 1 would be about money, paragraph 2 would be about prison, paragraph 3 would be about addictive qualities or not addictive qualities. And then if we're talking about an argument essay, many people have been taught that we stick our counter argument here. And your counter argument, a lot of times we'll start with like, some people say, and then you'll present the argument and then you'll say, but I'm right. And then you'll have your conclusion. Okay. How many people at some point have been taught this structure of an essay? All right. There's a few reasons why you're taught this structure. One, it's because it's really focusing on teaching you paragraph structure. And your teachers in elementary school and junior high, they really wanted you to focus each paragraph on one topic. And that is good writing. You should have each paragraph focused on one topic, right? And this was one way to ensure that your students did that. But what ends up happening here is that you've created a list rather than a complete solid argument. And so that when you try to have transitions between these things, like when you try and transition from prison to addictive, a lot of times you'll use transitions like next, or also, or third, or the even worse, thirdly, right? And you kind of just have these mechanical transitions. That's a sign that you've just been sort of listing out all of these different arguments. But have you ever seen this structure of argument printed in real life? Like, if any of the essays, did Emerson or Thoreau or any of the essays that we've read in here use this structure of argument? They don't. It's because it's quite weak. This is a really big argument on its own. I'm going to have to say how we can earn money for the state. Does that mean that the state is growing like marijuana farms? You know, does that mean that the state is paying people who are growing? Like, is it just a taxation? Like, how do we regulate this thing? That's going to take an entire essay to do on its own to justify just that one point. The other part that really doesn't work about it is this placement of a counter argument. You have done so much to develop your own argument. And then after all of that, you're like, oh, but also a lot of people think I'm wrong. In conclusion, I'm right, goodbye. You know, it's like you've set up all this argumentation, then you undercut it before you like take off. And you're leaving your audience thinking about the counter argument rather than your own argument. Even if you have a refutation in there, you've introduced this so late. The other thing about this is the some people say. It's not what everyone uses, but sometimes this, knowing that you have to have a counter argument, you kind of like use it. You don't want to get into the real counter argument. You know, like, let's say I'm doing the non-addictive point. And I'm like, well, some people say marijuana is emotionally addictive, but that's a giant argument, right? So you're like, some people say it's emotionally addictive or socially addictive, but I don't think so. In conclusion, let's legalize marijuana. Like, it's really hard to have these like actual solid counter arguments at the very end and leave your audience with that point. And then if you don't want to do that, you're like, ooh, I don't even want to get into the socially addictive point because that's actually a really good point. I don't want to deal with that. So I'll say, oh, some people think it's physically addictive, but studies have shown it's not, so they are wrong. The end. Well, not a lot of people do say that it's physically addictive. And so here you are just kind of like inventing a counter argument so that it's easier to cut it, to like prove it wrong. And your audience can see right through that. So we're going to get away from this style of argument writing, and we're going to try and write something that has a little bit more structure to it and something that considers the counter argument a little bit more fully. So take out something for notes. We're going to just talk about the thesis statement and structure today. No. You want to? All right, you got something to take notes with, right? Okay, we're gonna move on. So this is kind of our word of the day today, not writing it word of the day, just writing it in your notes. But the type of thesis we're gonna use is called an enthymeme. And that's just a fancy word for a thesis statement that uses a claim and one reason. So back to the marijuana example, it would be like, we should legalize marijuana because it will cut back on prison populations. That would be an enthymeme. It's just a single reason for your claim to be true rather than multiple reasons. So you're very used to this kind of thesis statement. It's just shortened a little. Often that word is because, that puts them, that connects the two parts of your thesis. It could also be like since, or there's some other ways that you could see that. But the claim part is your sort of argumentative position. I believe in this thing. You don't have to say I believe, but it's like, this is the thing that I want. You should go see Spider-Man No Way Home this weekend. That's my claim. And then the reason part is the reasoning for my claim. It will be leaving theaters soon. For that example, again, there could be a lot of different reasons that I should go see Spider-Man No Way Home. I still haven't. One might be because I'm starting to see spoilers and I want to avoid those kind of spoilers. Two, it might be because it's a great movie, right? Three, it might be because it's a a really good time, blah, blah, blah. But I'm only focusing on the leaving theater soon part. And what happens with an enthymeme is that they usually have some kind of assumption in them. Like in this, I'll have to spend some time proving why seeing something in a theater is going to be better. But I don't have to state that assumption because the way that the logic works together does that for me. That's kind of a complicated idea. We don't need to focus so much on that. And think back to our discussion over Zoom. If you were awake for that. We were talking about how there are some arguments that are really good to argue about because they've got all this gray area to it and you can take up their position. There are other arguments that aren't so good to argue about because it's really based on like subjective opinion, like attractiveness or what smells good or whatever. So you want to make sure that your claim here is actually something that you can argue. Okay, got it? So here's some examples. You don't need to write these down. I just have different examples for these. I say, because junk food is bad for your health, the size of sodas offered at fast food restaurants should be regulated by the federal government. I've got a bit of a proposal argument here. It's like, here's my reason, and I put my reason first in this one, but it's bad for your health, so it should be regulated. That's my claim. I've got rehabilitation programs for individuals serving life sentences should be funded because those programs reduce violence within prisons. So I've got my proposal here, my claim about funding those programs, and here's why. And then I've got this last one that kind of goes with what we've been talking about with the American dream. Since Americans often assume wealth is evidence of hard work and merit, we tend to believe that economic prosperity proves the existence of the American dream. This one's a little bit like more philosophical, right? These two are very proposal based. This one, I have this claim that we believe that economic prosperity equals American dream. But we watched Queen of Versailles yesterday. That was very debatable. Did their economic prosperity really mean they were living the American dream? And so I say the reason we believe that is because we think wealth equals hard work. All right, here's another kind of thesis statement you can use. So you can kind of choose between these two. This one is where you still have an enthemy, but it includes a counter argument inside the thesis statement. So this is going to help us not wait till the very end of the paper to just introduce a counter argument. This kind of incorporates the counter argument through the whole essay. So this is when you have a summary of your audience's position, and then you might use a word like although or but to show that they are wrong right up front, or they need to reconsider their position in some way. And part of this is explaining the exigence, which is an AP word. You don't need to think, I mean, you don't need to absolutely know it because it's not showing up on a test for you guys. But basically, exigence just means like the situation. Like it's like the situation that you enter in with this argument. So if me and my mom are arguing about whether or not tattoos are attractive, which we've had that argument, then I'm going to explain the situation like around that argument so that people know why we were arguing. So something about what my mom believes. All right, so here's some examples of those. I took the same thesis statements as before and I added a counter to it. So it says, although many Americans value the freedom to determine what is right for their own health, there's the counter argument. The damage from eating too much junk food puts undue strain on the healthcare system, so the size of sodas offered at fast food restaurants should be regulated by the federal government. It's still the same enthemy, but I've added a little bit more to it about the strain on the healthcare system because I directly want to address my counter argument right up front. Or this one, many people do not want to spend their hard-earned money on prisoners, but rehabilitation programs for individuals serving life sentences should be funded. Same claim, because these programs reduce violence within prisons and ultimately save the taxpayer money. So it's like I've added this save the taxpayer money so that it can address their concerns. And then the last one, this more like philosophical one. Although Americans often assume wealth is evidence of hard work and merit, we underestimate the importance of luck, which shows that we should not assume that economic prosperity proves the existence of the American. Yeah.
So the point of this is you have this thesis statement in the essay. It needs to seem like prevailing theory for this is like this reason, and the point is to discredit that and show why it's wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. It's like if you have an audience that has a really strong opinion, it might be a good idea to like introduce their opinion from the beginning so that they know that this essay is directed towards them and specifically their attitudes. Yeah. So the way you choose which thesis to use really is dependent on what the argument is about and who your audience is. Like if you are doing if you're doing the marijuana argument, for example, and I want to argue that it's going to reduce prison populations, I kind of know based on where I am in Utah, let's say I'm writing this very locally, I'm going to publish it in the Salt Lake Tribune. I know where I am in Utah that my audience is not going to be super gung-ho about legalizing marijuana, right? And so I need to do a lot of work to help let them know that I know that they are seen and heard and I respect their opinions, but ultimately they're wrong. Yeah, exactly. Ultimately they're wrong. And here's why. So it's like a way when you're choosing, you want to decide how strongly does my audience have an opinion about this point? Because if it's really strong, I need to address them right up front. But if they don't really care, if it's like an audience that doesn't have a lot of interest in the subject, then maybe you don't want to use the counter argument thesis. Maybe you just want to use a straightforward. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so here are some rules of a good thesis statement. Number one, it is grammatically perfect. It's the most important thesis in your essay, so it should be as perfect as you can possibly make it. Number two, you're using literal language. Remember our lesson on idioms. No idioms in a thesis statement, only literal. Number three, it's specific. It's focused on a single reason. Number four, it's debatable. You're not saying something like, Dr. Borup is an English teacher. Yeah, like I am. So how are you going to make that argument? It needs to be something that you actually can argue. And then this last one is actually the most important to me. If you can't make it grammatically perfect, at least make it interesting. I have to read so many of these, and I want to be sort of invested in your argument. So I want something I haven't heard before. I want some new hot take, something a little scandalous. I don't know, something to like pique my interest, you know? So that needs to be a part of the thesis. You don't want to be proving something that everyone has talked about over and over again. That comes with practice, knowing what those arguments are, but through our discussions, you'll. Okay, so when you did the podcast, when you listened to the podcast, the argument I had you talk about was what role does education play in the American dream? No, I want to do a different one. Reading Great Gatsby. There is this section where Daisy says that if she had a little girl, she says, I'm glad it's a girl and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. And I think she's kind of referring a little bit to knowing that her husband is having an affair. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but she knows her husband's having an affair and she's thinking like, I wish that I was a fool too. I wish I didn't know these things. You know, it would make me happier not to know these things. So I want you to write a thesis statement. You can use the counter argument thesis or the ending thesis, whichever one you think applies. And I want you to answer the question, is ignorance bliss? So do you think that life would be better off not knowing things? Do you think that it's better to know as much as you can? And you can find some gray area here. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It just, you need to have a defendable position. You know, ignorance is bliss when it comes to global politics, but not when it comes to your relationships. You know, there can be areas to go. All right, I'm going to give you 4 minutes to write your own thesis statement on that paper. Try to make it fit with these 5 things. Should I read that one because I'm happy exchange. Okay, all right, trade thesis statements with someone near you.
Ignorance is.
I stole it. I put it out. I stole it.
That'd be like, oh, my house was there first, so I stole your robbery. That would make sense.
All right, here's what I want you to do. You're gonna go through each of these points with them. Is it grammatically perfect? Does they use literal language? Does it seem specific enough? Is it debatable? And ultimately, is it interesting? You're not doing them any favors by being too nice. It doesn't mean you have to be rude, but give them some constructive criticism. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, you're gonna do really well. You want one of these? They're doing
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
That's good. Oh, very tough. Let me add there. There you go.
You want to say not to maybe.
Yeah, I listen to JD.
Oh, you want to buy? Thank you.
Yeah, I think
I'm listening.
Whoa, this is changing.
All right, I think we should talk about Gatsby now. So
It is debatable. Oh, the person gets reduced. I don't know. It's debatable. I didn't know.
okay, we're gonna get back to thesis statements. We're gonna be practicing these for the next couple weeks. Okay, let me get your attention. Pull out your Gatsby books. If you don't have one, I've got a couple up here that you can borrow. Did anyone not get one last time though? All right.
Maybe because I'm somewhat mysterious, but I'm a part time. Very mysterious. No one really understands. My name's Rod. I throw these anonymous.
Ominous.
I throw anonymous parties. Anonymous parties.
What I would do to go to like.
What?
Yeah, they're just up here on this red free thing
Or like-
box.
Just wait. I know what happened.
No, we're not
Don't
spoiling
spoil it.
anything.
Are you done?
Okay.
That's what it's good.
That's when it ends. Oh, that's for the point.
All right, so I want to look on just page 2. We already read this line together. We even talked about it briefly, but I want to talk about it a little more thoroughly. It says that Nick thinks that Gatsby is gorgeous. He uses that word gorgeous because he recognizes that his personality is a series of unbroken gestures, but it's an if-then statement. So it's like Gatsby can only be seen as gorgeous or like somebody to admire or to look up to if we believe this point that personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures. So we talked about this idea of gestures and how that's like something on the outside, like you gesture with your hands. You might have a gesture of kindness, which is something that you act on, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's true to you. So I want to hear what you think about this idea, because Nick poses it as an if. We don't have to believe it. Do you agree that personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, or do you think that personality is something different than that? What makes up your personality? Part of what he's talking about here is this unbroken quality. That the gestures are successful, they're consistent. He's always performing in the same way. And so if he's always performing in the same way, maybe we can think about that as his personality. Do you think that a performance can ever be true when it comes to your identity or your personality? Sophie.
No, I kind of think the opposite. I think it's got to be the idea behind the gesture, like rather than what you actually see.
Okay, so then we get back into that like hot argument that we had about intentions versus actions, that the intentions or what's on the inside is actually the truth of who you are. Yeah.
Sometimes I think no, because sometimes like a person's gestures like really don't show their personality because they can be like really fake to you, like completely different, or like then you get like pathological liars and like people that like and stuff like that, and like that's not their true self, so it's not their personality.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is their personality. You should
Right.
have that.
I was just going to say
Yeah.
that. So if they're constantly lying, then is their personality that they are a liar? And so it actually
It's like
does
not their
convey the
true
truth.
personality, but it is their true personality.
Yeah, it's kind of both at the same time. Yeah, it's a conundrum, right? Tell me what it means. Like if you were to identify someone as fake, 'cause that's a word that your generation uses a lot to call someone fake. What does that mean? Like, how do you know when someone's being fake? Ashlyn says it's because they're lying all the time. You catch them in the lies. Are there other ways that you can tell if someone's being fake? Gavin?
Maybe they're kind of going along with
Oh, okay, so
they're kind of just like going along with others' opinions to more fit in.
all right, so it's about fitting in too. So it's about intention still, and they're adapting to other people and they're changing the way they act around different groups of people. Bryn?
Yeah, like if they're completely different around like different people, and you're like, wait a second.
Which one is the true, the real you? Okay, so like, I think it has to do then with group dynamics. And you're saying that if you're not a fake person, you're gonna act the same regardless of whatever group you're in. Okay, what would you, is that actually true? Like, put that to the test. I am a teacher, I'm in a group right now, right? And I am acting a certain way, but I'm acting that way because like my job dictates that I act that way. Like in real life, when I'm not in this setting, I do not speak this way. Like hypothetically, I might have a whole different set of vocabulary words that I use in my real life that I would never say in this setting. I would also never use those words with my family. So does that make me fake? Like right now, am I being fake because I'm not,
Well, here's the thing.
cussing?
When it's for your job, I don't think, because like Dallin, he's really good at this at Shields.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be fake when you're a cashier. They'd be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, happy to see
Customer's always
you."
right. Yeah, I love this job.
See, Dallin kills it. He kills on the fakeness, right?
Yes.
He makes them come up for it. I'm just like, I don't really care about you. Get on my line, right?
Okay.
But like, so it's not like Dallin's
So
a
Dallin's
fake
fake.
person.
Oh,
Oh, he's good at acting fake, I guess. I don't know. He's good at least.
I think
Yeah,
what
what do you call
is like different.
Yeah, what's
Because I think fake has like a negative connotation, like the way we start.
Yeah.
I don't think if it's for your job, it's as negative because like if anything that's a positive or good at your job, you're not using inappropriate language.
okay. But aren't you using it to your advantage if you're in social
Other
groups
people,
too?
like overall good, and like being fake, like if you're like a different person to every single person.
Ah, okay, so maybe it's okay to be different in different groups as long as you stay consistent with individuals.
It's like, I don't talk like this to my family.
Okay,
my friends.
right, okay, Kaylee?
You are student and you want to make some of the professional life. You want to be a good teacher.
Yeah.
So someone who I just like kind of like is trying to change themselves so that they or like using their eyes to get on trying to move as less and more.
I see. Okay, so there's this way that like if it's because of selfish motives, where like I'm doing it now, not because I would be offended about the way that I speak, but because I know that you guys might be offended, or you guys would be like, I'm not learning as well in this environment because my teacher's totally unprofessional, right? That's why I'm altering the way that I speak. And so because it doesn't have this selfish motive, then it's, and that I'm not trying to like hide something about myself, I'm just adapting, it's okay. It doesn't involve lying, because I did just straight up tell you that that's what I do, but I'm not gonna do it still, you know? Sophie?
It's more like being two-faced in
Ah.
a way, because like you can adapt and like say other things, but when you're like actually changing yourself and when the lying comes into play, like when you have different opinions, like in different groups of people, just so you can like fit in or kind of.
Yeah.
It's not like just changing like how you're saying things or like, because everyone's different. Like I'm different around adults versus like.
Right,
people I'm closer to.
right.
But when you're like your opinions change and you start lying, that's when it's more.
Okay, good. So it's like this two-faced quality that gives you a sense of being untrustworthy, and being fake has to include this kind of untrustworthy component if we're gonna call it fake. And just because someone is changing the way they speak, that doesn't make them untrustworthy. Okay, Ashley?
It also kind of goes back to like intentions, like you have good intentions when you change, like being a teacher, but like people like in groups, like they don't have like.
Hi, as I lay down.
Oh, yeah, it's up here in this purple crate. Sorry, go
They
ahead.
don't have like intentions for like.
Yeah, so we're back up to here.
The posters that we started.
Oh, yeah, give me a minute though. I need a minute. Okay, so it's like about then the intentions are the truth. And so if you have intentions to how could we qualify that as not fake? The intentions like match up with
Like the action.
the actions again? Okay, yeah.
This is, now that I'm thinking about it, it kind of doesn't make any sense. If I'm being honest.
I mean, the idea here is that I think we're all a little fake sometimes. Maybe fakeness doesn't have, like, we give it a negative connotation. Maybe it shouldn't have that negative connotation that we keep giving it.
Change society.
Maybe it's okay to be fake. Maybe it's actually even admirable to be fake. Does anyone ever wake up in the morning in a super bad mood, like crabby, hates everything, but looks in the mirror and decides, no, I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna see my friends, and so I wanna act happy today. No, none of you, you're like, no.
Your friends, you like your friends, so you're happy.
You actually do become happy?
You think you're gonna like them tomorrow. so you're not trying to screw
Yes,
them.
exactly. Yes, okay. I can't be the only one in here that hates my friends sometimes. Is that true? Not true? Okay.
Everybody's like, yeah, how you doing?
Yes, exactly. But you put on that persona, right? I can't help them, Sammy. I'm gonna have to get you after school.
No, I got
Oh, okay, got it.
I just mean, I don't know. I thought right here.
Oh, I see. You're participating in the discussion now. I see. Okay, so yeah, you put on that persona because you want to make sure that there's this kind of like consistency in your behavior, I think. Because a lot of times it's not my friends that have done something to make me hate them. It's just me that's in a crabby mood. And so I hate them that day, right? It doesn't mean that I want to stop being friends with them forever. So you want to build up, you want to like maintain that sort of level of performance for them, right? So I think that, yeah, it's complicated. I think that it's really hard to see, like we are always thinking about people who are superficial and how this might be a sign that they're untrustworthy, but maybe that superficiality is this thing that they're trying to do for themselves to make themselves a better person. And maybe someday that superficiality is going to seep down into this like lower self, you know? Thanks. We're all onions, says Shrek. Does that mean that the center of the onion is more onion than the outer part of the onion?
Hold on.
Right? Like it's all you. So on the outside, you deciding to be superficial that day, that's still you. Yeah, we should watch Shrek.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like based on that, like, the last like week I've not understood this sentence. Like, I look at it, my mind goes like,
Uh-huh.
like it kind of makes sense now because in Unbroken series of successful gestures, that doesn't mean consistent. Like when we put on personas as people,
Yeah.
like when we put on personas as people, it's not technically lying. Like me sitting here, like giving this long rhetorical analysis of a random sentence in a book, like that's technically not me, but it's part of my personality, like a different aspect of me. So it's not
Yeah.
lying intentionally. Like it's unbroken, it's not consistent, but it's consistent in the way that like it's the same thing that you would do in that like situation.
Yes.
So like being fake is more like changing something so you get gain in the moment, but not like sticking with that. And like you can be like 9 different people on the same day, but sticking with and be consistent with people being honest, like an honest lie kind of. Like that's a lot
Yes.
different than just like deciding, oh, I'm just gonna be something completely different to take care of this thing and then drop it in 2 days and now I'm something completely different because I want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's say at my heart, I'm a mean, horrible, nasty person. If I am constantly performing happiness and kindness and maybe I'm changing around as I go, but does that count then?
It's
Or is that fake?
I don't think anybody is like to their core something. Like everybody
I
is
see.
everything they express.
Yeah.
Like inside, you might despise everybody in your classroom today, or just like in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you also like want to help them out, and also like feel uncomfortable staying up there and just preaching to people at the same time. Like you want to share things with them.
And so that makes it a part of me, even though there's that
Yeah, you want
inconsistent.
conflicting intentions.
Yeah.
And it's the ones that get expressed in different situations. Like if those intentions stay the same, if you're not expressing them, that's how you're being true.
Yes, good. I really like this idea. And I really think this applies to how Gatsby presents himself too. So let's get into Gatsby a little bit more, because now we've talked about whether or not we can trust certain people, whether or not we think they are fake, what would make somebody fake versus true to themselves. And we've got these 3 main characters in this first part that are presenting themselves in a certain way. We've got Nick, Daisy, and Tom. We're not going to really talk about Jordan today. Nick, Daisy, and Tom are the 3 main characters of this chapter 1, right? So what I'm going to have you do, and you can do this alone or with a partner or a little group, however you want, you are going to find a quotation that shows who these people truly are. Like try and find this core truth about this person. A quotation for each character. I didn't write that well. So you're finding 3 quotations, one for Nick, one for Daisy, one for Tom, and just write them in your notes, write the page number where you.
So it has to be what they're saying, or just like a quote?
No, it can just be about them too, something that really expresses who this person really is.
Down and Jamie live on the-
Where's your sheet? Right here.
Yeah, you can move over there, Ashley.
Nick is just like absolutely.
Jackson's completely alone up here, aren't you? Where are these people?
Well, we know where Jaden is, he abandoned, yeah. We're switching around. sweetheart. When we just read the first couple of pages and his brand of snobbishness, right? So I would love to hear from somebody who had a quote that was not from the first 2 pages. Yeah, Sophie?
So we found one on page 4, and it's when he gave that guy directions to the. And he says, I was a guide, a pathfinder, and a original settler.
Yeah.
I think it kind of tells that he just kind of needs the sense of superiority.
Yeah.
He was born into like money and stuff, and has this idea, but he just like wants to belong and wants to like be something.
Yeah, and I think this is like classic. This is an experience that still stands, at least from what I hear. You move to New York, you're new to the city, it's scary and overwhelming. And a couple months in, some tourist asks you for directions, and suddenly you're a New Yorker now, right? And you've got this like sense of like, maybe superiority because it's like this big city and you belong there, but it is also like, I can finally fit into this spot. And I think Nick has a really hard time feeling like he fits into any situation that he is in. He's kind of this wallflower type that kind of drifts to the outer edges and describes everything going on, but is he ever like the center of attention? All right, tell me some more about Nick. Kaylee? Oh, where is that part? What page? Ah, yes. Okay, what does this tell us about Nick?
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going back to our discussion about people being fake, Nick is on like high alert for that. And I think all the flitting around from topic to topic kind of shows that he thinks that Daisy and Tom are 2 of these superficial fake people. And he's disgusted by him. Disgusted and confused, he says. He likes that they're thinking of him and that they've heard about him, back west or whatever, but he doesn't love the impression that he's got from either of these 2. Okay, any other quotes about Tom that shows who Tom is? Even if, oh yeah, Rachel.
The one about him, like with telling about the book, the idea is if we don't look out, the white race will be and stars will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific stuff that's been proved. It's kind of a dumb character.
Yeah.
He listens to stuff and and you can tell no one took it seriously. Like Daisy makes fun of it a little bit later on, but
Yeah,
the white race. We're talking about the white race.
right. I said Tom, didn't I? What quotes for Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, he is like, to me, he's like that guy who his only source of information is Joe Rogan, and he acts like an expert. It's like, I've gotten this one idea from this one book that I've read, and it's a very dumb idea, and I'm going to just talk about it all night and never shut up about it. And I've read one book, but now I'm an expert, you know? And the source that he talks about is,
It's a Joe Rogan fan.
yeah, right? The source that he's talking about is this, it's on the bottom of 12. It's The Rise of the Colored Empires by this man, Goddard. It is a kind of mashup of a real book. So there was a guy named Stoddard and there was a guy named Grant, and both of them were really responsible for the rise of an idea called eugenics. Eugenics is a theory that says you can control what your population will look like based on controlling who can have kids. And so it turned into a very racist idea. I mean, it was a very racist idea from the very beginning, and they sought to like control birth rates in certain populations. So there were things like forced sterilization, or actually, well, I don't know, I don't want to tell you guys this, but the Planned Parenthood started as a eugenicist kind of like program, this way of like making sure that only certain people are able to give birth. That's an idea that the Nazis globbed onto like pretty strongly, and they took that from these two Americans and a movement that started in America. So that's the book that Tom is talking about, and he is just obsessed with this book. Okay, so tell me something else about Tom that tells us about his character. Eli?
I'm gonna have to find this real quick. I've got an idea about it that's kind of really weird, so
Okay.
you're gonna have to bear with me. It's 7, it's at the bottom of the first paragraph.
Uh-huh.
It's just that one sentence. It was a body capable of enormous leverage, a cruel body.
Yeah.
It interests me because he's using the word capable here, which means that like he's able to do things that are like very large, like he's just a big guy. So he, like, if he wanted to, like, he could go out and murder somebody with his bare hands. Like, that's what he could do as a character. Like, that's just what he's capable of, not what he does. So when he does things like, he can do things cruelly, like a little bit when he's talking about the white race. It's not like he's intentionally being malevolent. It's more like he's like harsh in a sort of matter of fact way, I guess.
Interesting. It's almost like he hasn't had to be very self-reflective.
That's what that was about. So this is gonna sound really weird. Okay, so Tom and Daisy, like, they don't seem superficial to me. It seems more like they don't have enough emotional maturity. Like, they kind of stay away from their feelings in such a way that, like, they're not making small talk with Nick necessarily. Like, they can't find a way to relate to him because, like, they're not emotionally mature enough to like open up at least a little bit. So they can't really find that. So Tom here, like, it's somewhere in here. Nick says like he got depressed by the book that he was reading.
Yeah.
But it's more like Tom's trying to find like some form of emotional maturity, like in literature, and is like he's mad at races, but it's more like he can't reconcile something within himself.
Yes.
And sorry, just this last thing, by this man Goddard. Have you ever read Scythe?
I actually haven't yet.
It is so good. So
I've heard that. I gotta read it.
There's this character, he's Scythe Goddard. Scythe's the like main characters that are like, they name themselves after famous people, like they choose that. And this guy's kind of like a Nazi sort of guy. Like
Interesting.
He's kind of weird characters. Like in the later on in the books, like he ends up like in charge of this big organization. He ends up what did he do? Like he's just futuristic Hitler. Like he's really charismatic. He's cruel. Like people can see he's dangerous and he's evil, but like in a way that you can get on board with and you can trust him to a certain level. So he's very good at getting what he wants, and you don't trust him. Like you let him do it. And it's sort of like what he does in the book, Goddard, this whole time, like he sways people to his beliefs, even if they don't trust him, like they really don't like him, like they'll go along with him in a certain way. And that's sort of what Tom's doing with this book, like
especially with his affairs.
So I'm trying to like relate a book that came out like 9 years after this book and say like this is the inspiration for it.
Well, do you think it could be?
It's like this it feels like this character of Scythe Goddard from this book was based off this idea from Hemingway about like somebody who writes a book that's very compelling and you can tell it's like a malevolent idea.
Oh, you mean Fitzgerald, right?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, Fitzgerald. Like it catches on to somebody like Tom, where they're trying to like express some form of like emotional vulnerability that they don't have in a book. So like he's really I'm sorry. I'm
You're
trying
okay.
to explain anything. I don't know how to do it right.
Yeah, no, this is a great idea. And I also think that it's backed up by how Daisy thinks of his violence too, because she has this bruise on her knuckle, right? So he's obviously in some way been physically abusive with her, but she says it like, oh, it's just because he's a hulking physical specimen of a man. It's not because he's intentionally hurting me.
Yeah, so like they're both kind of like insincere, but it's more like a bitterness because they like don't know how to get out of it. They're not trying to just, they
Yes.
don't know how to be sincere.
Yes, good. I really like that. They don't know how to actually be sincere.
I forgot my original point. Did it make sense?
It made sense to me,
Okay,
but I
alright.
think there were a lot of points in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
good,
sorry.
good. No, you're good. Dash?
So I have another one for Tom.
Yeah,
So it's on page 6, it's the last sentence in the second paragraph.
yeah.
And it says, I had no sight to Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom was drift on forever seeking, a little wistfully, for the dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable belonging.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems to fit kind of with this point that Eli is making too, that they're both like searching for meaning. What did you think of that idea that he's wistfully dramatic turbulence of some irrecoverable football game? What is that kind of character is he then?
To me, it kind of seems like that nothing is ever good enough for him, that he's always looking for something better.
Yeah, if we go back to that American Dream discussion, the better, fuller, richer, it's like there's never going to be in the American Dream, there's never a best, full, rich. It's always something more. And Tom seems to be like embodying that. I also love that line because it kind of says that he was like a high school football player who is like past his prime, like that was the height of his life, being a high school football player, getting that one touchdown, and he's constantly looking back to that moment, and that it's wistful because he's never going to be able to recover this football game from the past, So not a very flattering character. Nick hates Tom because of his racism and for a lot of other reasons. I also hate Tom. Is there any recovering Tom, like from this initial impression? I'm not sure. Keep reading about Tom, see if it works. Daisy, though, tell me about Daisy. Jaden.
She finds the
She's an optimist, that kind of thing. Okay.
page 14.
Okay.
She says, I love to see you at my table. You remind me of a rose. Absolutely. So I think she just finds the good in everyone. Just like she was trying to find the good in Tom. Oh yeah, he's not.
Yeah. Or like trying to maybe that's an admirable quality because here she is, an optimist trying to find the good in people, but maybe it's a naive quality and like on purpose naive that she's trying to ignore the bad in people because Tom is having an affair and she's trying to pretend it's not happening and just have their dinner. Yeah, Maggie?
Like putting on a mask, because like page 8, like down at the bottom, it's like she's like, then she laughed and sort of charming laugh, little laugh, and I laughed too, and it came forward into my paralyzed with happiness. So it kind of like, she's almost like, I know what's happening, and you can kind of see it sometimes, but I'm just gonna act like you said nothing's happening. And she's kind of just like, yeah, it's happening, but guess what? We're gonna just look forward,
Yeah, and I think her voice, like the way she says things is so important to this book. It comes up over and over again, like the tone of her voice and the fact that she says like she has a charming little laugh and then she has this like fake stutter right there. I'm paralyzed with happiness. It does feel like that's a performative quality that she's taking on. Like I want to put on this happy surface so that everybody will think that that's me, But then there's this moment where she says that she hopes her little girl will be a fool. Go to page 17. So does that mean that Daisy's kind of like a feminist here, that she's just like, oh, women have it tough, or what is this little line all about? Yeah.
I think it's like, because this part is the long story, it's hard to be interrupted by Tom. In the future, also be interrupted by Tom. And in that opportunity, this was decided to, she decided to
oh, in this kind of world you're in, there's a girl to school, and also pretty to attract someone, like, to touch someone, and they have to do like work. Once a fool is like, just the night, you don't know what's that.
Yeah, so then it's a little bit like meta. She's like commenting on her own performance and saying it would be better for a girl to be naive. So I am playing naive because this is what is better, because Tom is going to constantly interrupt me no matter what. That's such a great observation. So back to Jaden's comment about her being bright, like in an optimistic term, maybe she's bright in like an intelligence way too. Yeah,
I
Sophie.
agree with that. I really think that she actually does understand like how unfair it is, but she really is putting on a mask, and she's saying that like, oh well, I hope she puts on a mask. It's easier not to know how unfair and how
Yeah, and then you think though about how this might be showing some complacency too, because the way that Nick reads it, he says, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. So it feels like she's even using this little, like, I hope she's a fool line to like control Nick and what people think of her.
like a way of saying like, ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
It's like her own little, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And but Nick knows that she actually is not ignorant in that scene, and that she maybe is using that ignorance as bliss to have other privileges. I mean, she is very wealthy. So if she decides she's going to actually open her eyes and see that Tom's having an affair and actually do something about it, she risks losing that wealth. So isn't there like a lot of advantages to being ignorant in that situation? Yeah, Gavin.
I think she is like also like aware, and I think she kind of like has a mentality that she doesn't think that
Mhm.
so instead of just like looking at parts, more like sticking to that and then like
Oh, interesting.
like this issue. And that's why this is what optimism
Yeah.
just like being sad about it.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like a romanticization of the sadness, of the like role of being a little bit subservient to Tom, to the point where we're not trusting that she's gonna, even if she believes in this kind of little feminist message, she's not gonna do anything about it to advance it for anyone else. Yeah. Okay. That's where I want to stop our discussion of this first chapter for today. Unless are you dying to say something else? Are you liking it so far? It's good. It's very plot driven after those first couple of pages. And I want to have a discussion next time about the old money versus new money type stuff that happens on West Egg, East Egg. So we are going to watch a little bit more of Queen of Versailles. I know. For next time you're reading, not next time Friday, but next Tuesday, because we never have homework due Friday. Next Tuesday, you're reading chapters 2 and 3.
They're just so ugly, I'm sorry.
Oh, they're children.
I think like they were like if they're that rich. They have like a style. Sorry, I didn't keep my yeah. I love it.
Oh my gosh, Wyoming.
So proud. Wow. Dying. Oh, but 93%. And I'm like,
Okay, so we're watching that for the end of class, so that's about 15 minutes. And if you want to keep watching it, it's on YouTube for free. Just Google it.